After a year-long hiatus, the Completionist is back. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is a now disgraced, very popular YouTuber with over 1 million subs. Matter of fact, you might even recognize the logo. He was really popular in like the mid-2010s, like 2015, that kind of era. And like the name suggests, the dude would complete video games, and then he would give an overall assessment of if the game is worth fully completing or not. Essentially, doing a full completion and a review at the same time. Now, I need to provide just a little bit more context as to what we're talking about today so I can outline what the goal of this video is. The Completionist is a now disgraced YouTuber, being that just a few short years ago, the Completionist, or Gerard is his name, was exposed by two very big YouTubers, Carl Jobst and Some Ordinary Gamers, aka Mutahar. Essentially, the Completionist, along with a lot of other members of his family, were a part of and the operators of this foundation, the Open Hand Foundation. We're gonna get more into the details of it as this video goes on, but essentially what you need to know is that the Completionist hosted IndieLand, which is a charity event, and all of the donations being taken, he said that these donations going to the Open Hand Foundation would be dispersed to charities that were helping with a specific type of dementia that his mother had died from. But as it turned out, none of this money went anywhere. Over $600,000 that had been donated over the span of just shy of a decade, 10 years, all of that money was sitting in the Open Hand Foundation, and none of it had ever been donated to anybody that they had referenced prior. And with the coverage from Mutahar and Carl Jobst covering this, and with all this being covered and exposed by Carl Jobst and Mutahar, it essentially sank the Completionist's reputation. He attempted to make a few responses where he didn't come up with any receipts, he tried to defend his point, and then he went radio silent. Until just a few days ago, where he dropped this video right here, You Deserve Answers. Now, we won't be covering the entire thing, as not all of it is relevant to what we're talking about today, but the goal of this video, similar to a live stream I did covering this, is going over everything, making sure that we stay fresh on what originally happened, so we don't deal with too much recency bias going over this new response. Essentially, I don't want the context of just this video alone to paint the entire story of what has happened so far. So we'll start by going over a bit of what had happened the first go around, some of the key issues that people had with how he handled it in the first place, and then we'll take a look at the new response and see what holds up, what doesn't, see if any of this holds up in comparison to how he originally handled things, and hopefully just recap a lot of this to help some people along if they kind of forgot what had happened. Of course, though, last 10 seconds, if you're new here, consider subscribing to the channel. We're getting close to our 100K goal for the end of the year. A simple button press for you means the world to me, and if you end up hating me later, it's just another button press away. But if you also just found this info helpful, please be sure to leave this a like. It helps boost it in the algorithm. Regardless of if you do either of those things, just thanks for watching. To start things off, shout out to June the King. They have an excellent video going over the Completionists, like truly from when they first started doing YouTube, their attempts at that, all the way into the controversy that we're referencing from all those years ago. Now, to go back to that Open Hand Foundation, because it might have been a little confusing, essentially, this was created for Gerard's mom here, actually seen in this photo, and this Open Hand Foundation was made with the entire family involved. Essentially, he was one of the head honchos of it, right? And they were tasked with finding different organizations to end up giving donations out to. And so they start up the Open Hand Foundation, and now that that Open Hand Foundation has been started up, the Completionist goes ahead and advertises IndieLand. Now, IndieLand is this event where they play indie games at this game event, and he did it every year, and all of the proceeds from these events would go directly to the charity, the Open Hand Foundation. Now, no one is really paying attention to this money. They're not really thinking about it. Keep in mind the Open Hand Foundation, it's a 501(c) or something along those, so it's public, like this info is public. And about 8-9 years after, you know, all of this has started, after IndieLand has started going every year, they receive an email from Carl Jobst. One of the members on the Open Hand Foundation receives an email.
Carl Jobst emailed the Open Hand Foundation. What he got back was an email from Jacques Khalil, a board member and brother of Gerard. Here he stated that, quote, "We have been evaluating potential beneficiaries who align with our vision. Entities that could use our funds efficiently and effectively without a substantial portion being diverted to administrative expenses." The second notion that closed the email was Jock asking Carl if he knew of any good charities the foundation could donate to. This is a rather strange question, especially considering that the foundation documents demonstrate that every member of the board was responsible for seeking a charity to donate to. And to ask Carl Jobst is to insinuate that though they should have conducted hours upon hours of research, they could have somehow missed a charity for their very specific cause. This response only brought on more questions. Primarily, Carl asked about Gerard's statements that they were partnered with the UCSF. when in fact the Open Hand Foundation had still not donated anything, and on the Open Hand's website, they were listed as a benefactor.
But to get this out of the way, the main claim wasn't surrounding this idea that it seemed like they were taking the funds that were supposed to be going to charity and were using them for other purposes. Maybe that was the case in a small way, given the expense reports that you had just seen when they were talking about why restricted donations are sometimes preferred. But the focus was that it seemed heavily implied, especially like the benefactor page or how the Completionist was talking about it at Indieland, things like this, that they had been donating their money to these charities when that wasn't the case. It was this huge lump sum of money, $650,000, that had just been sitting in this account. And as you saw with the emails, it just seemed really confusing. And at, the bare minimum, didn't seem like it was adequately being taken care of. The first dude that you get in contact to, and after the years that they have been supposedly looking for good places to donate this money to, they're asking Carl if he has any good suggestions. Just a very peculiar way to handle something like that. So Carl inevitably ends up pulling in some ordinary gamers, Mutahar, and then they end up having a phone call with the Completionist and essentially are calling it out. And Gerard doesn't handle it super well.
Did anyone tell you?
You weren't notified that the money was sitting there the whole time?
I knew it was sitting there at a certain point, and that's what made me proactively go about it. Like,
do you know when that point was?
I was made aware in 2021 when the money hadn't moved yet, and that's what made me go, that's not fucking cool. And that's when I got personally involved to move it. And
did anyone?
2021, last year, 2022.
There are two takeaways from the start of the call. Gerard found out that the money had not been moved in 2022. This is despite him being on the board and him running an event for the foundation. This is already negligent on his part.
So the goal on the back end for my family that I've been told is like, we're just going to raise a bunch of money and then give it to one org and like make a bigger impact rather than just giving smaller donations that don't move the needle.
I mean, as of this week, we've been having conversations about moving it as early as today or tomorrow, just because the pressure I got from you guys, if I'm being quite honest.
To break this down, what Gerard is alluding to is that his family wanted to make a restricted donation. Restricted donations are donations that go to fund something very specific within an organization. They are restricted to being used in whatever way the donor specifies. There are multiple issues with this statement, as the Open Hand Foundation has not, nor Gerard, ever mentioned a restricted donation. Many donations can be restricted in small amounts. There is no need to stockpile money.
Now, first off, there has been some pushback on the idea that you could just do small little tiny donations as restricted donations. I think with a lump sum that big, I'm sure there is more like particularity involved in that. But the big issue is that this restricted donation thing had never been brought up before. And the details of doing something like that, like accruing a giant lump sum donation to go one specific place, is something that I think a lot of people believe should be well known to, anybody that's willing to donate to your foundation, to your cause. On top of that, Gerard, as he says, knew about this for over a year, but apparently didn't know about this the years leading up to it. And he's on the board. He has access to this information, which, as June pointed out in his video, is pretty negligent and not something that you want to find out about the person who's been leading, this indie land thing, and you've been donating to it. You don't want to find out they haven't been paying attention at all to the foundation that you're putting your money into. Also, this comment about we want to do one big amount, because all these small amounts don't really move the needle. But if we're using that line of thinking, anybody that's donating just a small amount to an organization isn't doing anything. I don't really like that line of thinking, because then we're just in the headspace of only rich people, or, accruing a large sum is the only time it's worth it to make a donation. But on top of that, when Gerard gets pushed up against the wall, he starts getting very manipulative. And Mutahar and Carl are quick to recognize this, and they weren't super keen about that.
The last thing I want to do is ruin the legacy of my family, of my mom and her memory, especially because this is such a personal thing for the last 25 years of my life. I'm not trying to be like, do you guys want money to help me hide this? It's not what this is at all.
Sections of the call would be construed as manipulation.
I'm just asking from a humanity perspective of like, if I am the target of this, I have 20 mouths to feed. I have sponsors. I have a business. I'm trying to make video games. I'm trying to get out of content creation so I don't have to worry about YouTube anymore and do better things in the world. And I just know, because of my track record of things like G4 exploding, me being friends with JonTron when he was a racist. You know, I've been a part of, like, you know, pro Jared, and I don't want to go home tonight and tell everyone, hey, there is a gigantic thing coming to claim my career, and you all have to close down and find somewhere else to do. I know this is shitty me to say this. I'm not trying to ask for sympathy or anything, but this kind of stuff, I mean, I've been following your guys' stuff for years. The stuff with Billy Mitchell, Carl, the stuff that you've done, Muto, with tons of content creators over the years. Like, there's no nuance to this. People are going to see this, and they're going to immediately go, that Gerard guy who's been nice to a bunch of people actually isn't very nice overall. Fuck him. Even if I survive this somehow, even if this is like, people are like, well, whatever, that's how it is. Yeah. It's going to take the passion out of what I do. People aren't going to trust me ever again. I'm not going to trust myself ever again. And I'm just going to walk away from all this. Like, this is like me being like, great, so I'm out. Not just of content creation or being an online personality. I'm just going to stop. I'm just going to disappear and start over and never talk to anyone ever again.
Gerard disconnected halfway through the call. This is what Mudhar says before he's back.
I'll just say right now, there was definitely there was a lot of guilt tripping throughout that entire video.
Yes.
Or throughout that entire call. We absolutely have to cover this just for this fact that this is an actual piece of fraud. Like, this is legitimate fraud.
Specifically that part where Gerard was also saying, like, I won't be able to, like, people won't be able to trust me. I won't be able to trust myself. Almost sounds like he's admitting to the fact that this is something he's aware of and is bad. That may be a complete nothing burger of a thing, but to me, it just seems like he's aware of how bad that could look to the public. So I would just think that maybe if you understand those things, you might go about doing things a bit differently. I don't think I really need to tell you. It seems pretty clear. You know, I've got mouths to feed, blah, blah, blah. I'm just putting all this on you guys. You know, if you come forward with this information, I'll leave. I won't talk to anyone, etc. Looks pretty bad. Inevitably, they come out with their videos. And at the beginning of it, the Completionist did make a response video. Now, I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty details of it, but essentially, he made this response, said, no, there was no charity fraud explicitly, like they weren't, you know, embezzling funds, things like that. But he proceeds to bring up 0 receipts. This is one of the people that are a part of the board that have access to all of this, and he chooses, in a situation where I think that bringing receipts and information and proof of transactional history with the foundation that is currently under scrutiny, you should definitely be bringing those to the table. And the fact that he didn't really hurt his reputation. This response pretty much ended up doing absolutely nothing for anybody except for reinforce the narrative and belief that there was something very scummy going on. That's effectively everything that you need to know from what had happened originally to help us better understand and look at what's going on in the new response video, which we're going to start taking a look at now. He starts this video off by addressing why he had been silent, which is that the foundation had been under investigation. And then he follows it up with an apology.
I was being accused of embezzlement and charity fraud, with Carl and Mudahar directing their viewers to report my family's charity to the authorities, prompting a criminal investigation by the Department of Justice. We were informed that the investigation officially wrapped up in the fall of 2024. All that remained was a meeting with the Department of Justice to clear up any lingering questions, such as why the open hand had been mass flagged in the first place. I was constantly told by the Department of Justice that this is the final meeting, and the final meeting was right around the corner. But officially now, over a year has passed since then. I didn't want to speak publicly about this whole investigation until I had those final results in my hand, hence my silence all this time. The honest truth is that the Department of Justice will not respond to any emails, despite telling OpenHand's lawyers that they're interested in one final meeting to close the case. It has been over a year waiting on this matter, and the fact of the matter is, I need to move on. Whenever I get this final documentation, whatever it says, I don't care what it is, I will share the results with whatever I am legally allowed to share as soon as I can. And I am still absolutely confident that the accusations of fraud and embezzlement will be proven false. However, even if we never broke the law, serious moral mistakes were still made by myself and the foundation. The open hand took far too long to donate. We never explained why it took so long until after everyone called us out. And I lied about this for all of Indieland's years, both knowingly in 2023 and unknowingly in all the years before. But it doesn't matter what kind of explanation either I or anyone else involved might provide. This happened, and rightfully so, it pissed off everyone. To my viewers and donors, friends, and collaborators. I am so sorry for hiding the truth. It was selfish, full stop. I want you all to have the context as to how everything happened, but nothing I've said so far is an excuse, and neither is anything else in this video. All of this is on me. Even if it wasn't exactly how I imagined things would go, my goal always was to make sure this money got donated to the right place as quickly as possible. And I'm immensely thankful that it got done.
First things first, very based apology. Good thing to own up to the fact that it did not shape out the way you wanted to, regardless of what your argument is on your side, to apologize to the viewers, the people that were impacted, the people that donated. So far, this response, giving the answers, great. Now he spends a couple minutes going over the origins for the foundation, but then we jump into the problem Karl Jobst and Mutahar, actually bringing this to light, and he ends up giving his side of the story yet again. I'm just going to include a few bits from this segment here.
However, after we finished our 5th show in November of 2022, I spoke with my family about all the good we were doing, and I really wanted to get a representative from one of our charity partners to come and speak at IndieLand 2023. Only then did I learn that the Open Hand Foundation had never made a contribution since its founding, and there were no official partners. All the money was sitting there, untouched and accounted for, ready to be donated. But at the time, there was a massive disagreement between myself and my family. I personally thought it was important that the money be donated right away. Meanwhile, my family's perspective was very different than mine. They had been negotiating with several organizations to establish contracts to take a bulk sum of money as a restricted donation. These conversations revealed that many of these potential organizations were happy to take the money, but didn't want to track what they saw as a low sum compared to the 6 to 7 figure amounts they were used to receiving from mostly corporate interest groups. After a lot of tough conversations over the years, my family settled on a goal of raising $1 million before donating, hoping that this would be a massive milestone that would help organizations to take the foundation way more seriously.
Now, full stop, that's kind of a big issue. A big issue that I genuinely think should have been made public. We're looking at everything in hindsight, but I want to ask you as a viewer of this to think about you being in the position that Gerard was, that the Completionist was. This foundation has been accruing donations. Their father was hosting a golf tournament that was also bringing in funds. But the vast majority of the money coming into the Open Hand Foundation was coming from Gerard, was coming from his IndieLand event. His marketing and advertising and getting people to donate to the charity was the lion's share of the money that was sitting with them. And with them being in talks and negotiations with these different organizations over those years, it seems a bit strange that his brother in that email exchange with Karl Jobst was asking him for recommendations. It's just, even if it was just like a handout thing, it's just such a strange thing to do. So from my perspective, at the very least, his family is a bunch of assholes, because why are they thinking that they're going to know better, or they're thinking that that's a better idea, when the person who would know the audience of people that are willing to donate their money to, the Open Hand Foundation, if he thinks that they should be donating it right away, maybe they should be doing that. This is his side of the story, so take it as it is his side of the story. I'm not here to belittle the points that he makes or anything, just point out things that don't seem to make too much sense. Overall, truly this could be chalked up to his family just kind of treating him like a black sheep, which he has referenced before.
That means for the next 12 months, I knew about the money not being donated and was having constant conversations to get it to the right place, trying to repair relationships and negotiate in good faith with several different potential benefactors. Since it was now up to me to get this money donated, I needed to stay on the board of directors for Open Hand, at least until the donation was officially made. It was around this point that I realized that I was in way over my head.
To me, it sounds like he knew, and when he found out that, for this span of a year, that they had not donated this money in the years prior, that he said he needs to, step up and be someone to help get this money donated now. And he references repairing relationships with organizations. I'd love to know what that means. He references it later, given, the fallout from the Karl Jobst and Mutahar videos. But in this context, their videos hadn't been released yet. So what is the issue? What damage had they done to these organizations prior to all of this hitting the fan. Also, if his point is that his family is kind of making this choice that as a group they're going to go against him, Gerard, because they want to donate it all in a large lump sum as a restricted donation, why he suddenly thinks in this year he can kind of like buckle down and make sure it happens. He's already tried to make it clear that he doesn't really get a choice in the matter, that his family is kind of overruling his decision to want to donate it right away. Maybe he just means he's gonna push them harder, something like that, but again, just kind of seems a bit strange.
However, even at this point, I couldn't just do whatever I wanted, and this is where the real conflict started. I tried my best to express how upset I was, how upset all of you would rightfully be, and that this could cost me and so many people who worked with me everything we had created and built together, and I was simply brushed aside. I had learned the hard way that the charity world moves at a glacial pace, and I've been going around touting all these organizations and all the good we'll be doing for many years, only for all of it to be a bunch of empty promises. Even after I stepped up, my best efforts to donate as fast as possible would never be good enough, as every decision I wanted to make now had to be approved by a long list of people on both the open hand side and the potential benefactors that I have been speaking with. I did not have the final call on any major decisions when it came to the open hand and its finances. I was one of many people in charge. To my family, I was seen as the video game guy, not the business guy or the charity guy. Regardless, the outcomes were absolutely my responsibility.
He didn't get the last call on where they were donating, when they were donating, more specifically the when part. For somebody who is essentially the face of the Open Hand Foundation, I think that would be a pretty important thing to make clear. It's super easy for me to say this from the perspective of not knowing that familial dynamic, not knowing how a 501c works, but it is genuinely baffling to me, and I'm a bit confused as to why the idea to share this information with the people donating never came about. I can't imagine a world where there would be sufficient blowback that would equate to what he received by keeping this all, attempting to keep this all under wraps, versus saying, hey, it turns out disagreement with my family, who's also part of the Open Hand Foundation, we're not agreeing, and they're just kind of holding all of this money into one large lump sum that they want to do a restricted donation for. I don't think that's cool. I want your guys' money to go out to people immediately. I'm pretty frustrated by all this, and I want to make sure that I'm transparent with you guys, because I just found out, that's negligent on my side. I should have been keeping better tabs on it over the years. My bad, but this is where it is now, and I want to get ahead of this. Boom, bam, bop, all said and done. I genuinely, I just feel like that seems like what you should be doing as a response. I am truly curious to hear what you guys think about this. I'm kind of stuck between hindsight is 50-50 and the fact that is one of the first ideas that popped into my head. Like, I don't think that takes a rocket scientist. But moving on now, Gerard ends up talking about his phone call conversation that he had with Karl Jobst and Mutahar.
A week after IndieLand 2023 had wrapped up, and before I could get back to the donation efforts and conversations I was having, my heart stopped when I saw an email to the Open Hand Foundation came from a one Karl Jobst. He had been known at the time to be a groundbreaking creator that claimed to take down cheaters, liars, and scammers. And I knew what was coming next. A few days later, on November 10th, I received a message from another creator, Mutahar Anas, also known as Some Ordinary Gamers. I respected and trusted Mutahar, so when he asked if I wanted to hop on a Discord call to talk about a discrepancy with some of the Open Hand Foundation's publicly available documents, I agreed, thinking, hey, you know what? Maybe we could chat this out and clear the air. No problem. Mutahar never once asked about the laws or regulations that Karl had asked about, so I had no reason to think they were collaborating together, especially since they had no prior history together online. The rest of what's publicly available to all of you is essentially me having a panic attack while trying to be transparent with two creators I respected at the time, all at the behest of throwing my friends and family under several buses. I saw the headlines coming, and I spiraled, losing control of everything. I did my best to reiterate my family's infighting, the struggles with finding a donor for a restricted donation, and that no matter what was going to happen, all the money was accounted for and ready to be donated. And they even acknowledged that there was no evidence of embezzlement and that it's not even what they were asking about. So it gave me some hope that this whole thing could be recovered in some way.
I'm keeping it to the charity and like the money and why it hasn't moved. I won't personally be mentioning anybody family related and the personal hell that you honestly have to go through. That's like a fucking no-no for me personally. On my end, and I'm sure on Carl's end, that's something that obviously I think we can abide by. That's just an ethics thing for any journalist, really. The very big silver lining is the money is there, according to every PP filing that I've seen. It can all be like done right, you know. This isn't a situation of actual embezzlement or, you know, money being moved to the fucking Cayman Islands or some cryptocurrency offshore. This is a situation that can be rectified for very positive sakes. But yeah,
I was terrified and I should have kept my mouth shut. But some part of me believed that if I was honest right from the get-go, maybe I could get out ahead of this and it could end up just being more of a cautionary situation for people to know. 3 days later, Monday, November the 13th, Mudahar and Carl released their videos and the story was broken. It made donating even more important, but even more difficult due to the new online reputation of the Open Hand Foundation and myself.
Now, it's good that he goes over these phone calls. I don't really like how he ends up framing it, which is he makes it kind of seem like Mudahar or Karl Jobst in some ways went back on their word in a way. I guess maybe that's a bad way to frame it, but what I mean by that is he shows them talking about, oh, we're not going to bring up your family in this. We understand you went through hell with this. The good thing is the money is still there. Makes it seem like this was a much better conversation than what it truly was. And you guys saw that when I showed you guys the clips of him kind of freaking out and guilt tripping Mudahar and Karl and them saying, after feeling the guilt tripping and stuff, that they absolutely needed to cover it. With Gerard himself saying, I wouldn't be able to trust myself if this came out. I wouldn't, nobody would be able to trust me. He understood that going into it and was acknowledging it on himself as well. So it's just, I feel like you should own that in this apology if you're so candidly going to include everything else. But that might just be a personal preference of me, but continuing on. After these exposés went public, very quickly afterwards, him and his brother were able to get this $600,000 restricted donation out to a charity.
Thankfully, my brother and I were able to secure a meeting with AFTD the very next day. And by November 29th of 2023, the Association of Frontotemporal Dementia received $600,000 from the Open Hand Foundation. Soon after this donation was made, I resigned from my role on the board of directors, ending my relationship with my family's efforts in the Open Hand Foundation. All the information that I'm sharing with you right now and going to be sharing with you, this is what I wanted to say in that video. At the time, the Open Hands Foundation's legal counsel instructed me not to say or share anything because nobody knew what would be relevant to the pending investigation by the government. I was essentially handcuffed from telling the full story because our lawyers instructed me to not address any information potentially related to the ongoing investigation, which included receipts, potential evidence, and even fully admitting to any and all of my mistakes. When this response video failed to inspire folks to trust and believe in me still, I knew that my support systems were going to go away very quickly.
Now we have our answer as to why there weren't any receipts brought forward in that response. He couldn't. Now, I could be wrong here, but I think it might have been important if he had mentioned, hey, we're being investigated, so I can't comment on it. Everybody knows as soon as you're in an investigation, whatnot, you shut up. And if your lawyer tells you to shut up, you do. That might have helped more in inspiring trust in people with you, or at the very least allowed them to hold their judgment, given that the reason you weren't providing receipts wasn't because you didn't have any. It's because you shouldn't be given the situation. Moving on, he extends apologies to the people that ended up losing their jobs with his company, everything after that, his moderators, all this stuff. He goes into talking about the positive impacts from the donation, the $600,000 donation, as they had received an itemized list as to where those funds had gone, being that it was a restricted donation. And then he has a segment called Addressing False Claims, where he starts getting into, the drama of it. He pushes back on claims by Karl Jobst and Mudahar.
You, as a viewer, deserve the facts, and especially the truth. That's why I want to clarify as many of the allegations against me as I can that are absolutely false. First, I want to address the idea that the Open Hand could quickly just donate the money the same way you can just click donate on a charity website or Venmo or PayPal a friend.
Almost everyone is screaming at them just to donate the money, which should be pretty easy to do.
One thing you'll see is they'll ask me to gift an amount that is as low as $35.
The short answer is no. If we wrote a check to a charity with no agreements on how that money gets spent or how it's tracked, we would never have received a report detailing how our donors' money was being put to use. It would likely have gone to funding administrative costs like accounting fees and executive salaries. it had to be restricted to make sure that it actually went to dementia research. And negotiating with many of these organizations is really tough when you aren't donating tens of millions of dollars. To us, $600,000 was an astronomical amount of money, especially for me and my community. But in the charity world, that's small potatoes. There's a ton more to this whole thing, but that's about the best explanation that I can personally provide.
There are multiple issues with this statement, as the Open Hand Foundation has not, nor Gerard, ever mentioned a restricted donation. Many donations can be restricted in small amounts. There is no need to stockpile money.
I'm just, again, using a quick clip that we saw earlier from June the King's video. You can literally hop onto the AFTD, which they did the mass donation to, frontotemporal degeneration, and you can choose in small amounts restricted donations for these specific different directions, or unrestricted. So again, that isn't making a whole lot of sense. Now, on top of that, forgive me, I just sneezed like 10 times back to back. This idea that if we do this donation, it won't go to administrative expenses, things like that. It'll go to the actual research. All that you're doing when you're choosing that is making it so that someone else's donation that year is going to go to those administrative expenses. Some of this money has to pay the people that are taking care of and running the organization. It just does. Now, I understand that restricted donations can aid in making sure that they're not doing something shady, you know, like just tracking an expense as just expenses, similar to the Open Hand Foundation, and not being very clear about that. You can kind of get away with taking a little off the top in that sense. But he's so adamant on this point of making sure that this money was actually going to research, just making it seem like if we allowed that, that would somehow be a bad thing. It's like, no, like the administrators do need to get paid so they can make sure this stuff happens. That's not a bad thing. Now, although he may see it that way, maybe the people donating to his charity didn't. And maybe you should make sure you're on the same, you know, level of understanding about something like that before you start allowing people to donate in.
It was functionally impossible for us to just donate the money in a website's donate button section while being responsible to the people who donated to us and the cause that we represented. That obviously does not excuse the fact that it took far too long to donate.
You were not being responsible to those people for well over a year, let alone the multiple years that you, out of negligence, just didn't look into the organization that you were allowing money to get donated into, to find out that they hadn't moved it anywhere, and then to talk about it like it had. You don't really get to choose where you get to be responsible with the money that is coming from these donators.
Next, I want to talk about Twitch bits and Twitch subscriptions. If you don't know how bits and subs work, viewers can donate money in the form of Twitch bits, as well as subscribe to a Twitch streamer for perks like emotes and private streams. This money then gets split with Twitch, and the remaining balance then comes to the Twitch streamer at the end of the month. During the weeks of Indieland, all bits and subs that we received on the channel were put towards the donation goal throughout the event. I'm sure many of you have seen a lot of clips and memes at this point over the years where I have said we don't touch any bits or subs. Technically speaking, I do have to interact with them because I have to claim the income that comes to me and my company, and any money that Twitch pays out is income regardless of where it will end up going later on. If there was any discrepancy at the time, we made sure to donate extra to ensure accuracy, and sometimes that happened a few days after Indieland had wrapped up. No matter what though, dollar for dollar, everything did go to charity. For full transparency, on screen right now, you can see our revenue for Twitch bits and subs for every year of Indieland, and the document containing this data will be available for you down below. And absolutely none of it was used for either expenses or personal use. This can be corroborated by both our Twitch earnings and our unclaimed expenses year on year.
Now, for the part that I dislike the most, which is this thing that's about to roll up on the screen right now that you guys just saw. This little document that he references that he says is now in the description, so you can take a look, is their Indieland annual revenue. How do we think that we can fact check this? Hopefully in that document that he has included in the link down in the description below, it'll show where these numbers are coming from, right? No. It's just an Excel spreadsheet. Here's another Excel spreadsheet. Here is another Excel spreadsheet with no other info. Oh, example of expenses include travel, accommodation for guests, etc. Okay, great. I myself could make a copy of this, put in whatever numbers I want, and then just send it over to you guys, include a link in the description of me making in revenue 69 cents every year. There is no itemization. There is no receipt for what any of these things are. This is nothing. This is only a showcase of your ability to right-click on a box and select the color color that you want for it and choose a few different ones. I don't know about you guys, but I would prefer 100% that if he has no actual, he can't provide right now the proof of these numbers or where they're actually being pulled from, that he should just not be showing this. Just tell us that you can't show us the proper documentation where you're getting this information. And just to show you guys the rest of what is in this folder, this one is financial records and documentation for IndieLand. So there's the IndieLand documentation, and then here's the notice of them getting audited, which is providing none of this. And then this is the description and like details of what the AFTD did with the $600,000 donation. None of this is the proof that anybody has been asking for. I'd be hard pressed to believe that he is so dumb he doesn't understand that, so I'm just confused. And then the other one is just an archive of their uploads. So nothing crazy here.
In the now leaked Discord interview conducted by Carl and Mudahar, I had previously mentioned that some expenses were recouped by my company via Twitch revenue or reimbursements from the foundation. It actually turns out that I was wrong. No expenses were ever claimed by my company, either through Open Hand or through the Twitch revenue. Between travel expenses for guests, venue costs for 2022, food and drinks, and all sorts of other extras, that one video gamer spent approximately $88,000 running IndieLand across all 6 years. This also doesn't include the tax burden that one video gamer took on by processing Twitch bits and subscriptions, plus the man hours dedicated to preparing for and running these events.
Okay, so psych, apparently he just misspoke about covering the costs of it with, its own expenses, but then he also defended, look, the Open Hand Foundation, we only did this percentage of expenses. I don't know whether to make heads or tails of that. I guess just take him at his word that he just misspoke quite a few times about it. It's a strange thing to misspeak about. I don't know why you would, make that claim if it wasn't true. I don't know, just peculiar. Now we're jumping into this last big segment of the video. He goes over conspiracy theories and accusers, and some of this is kind of just silly, and I'll explain that as we go, but I'm just going to include, again, a few more segments here and pop in when I've got something to share with you guys.
Unfortunately, Carl and Mudahar have made themselves impossible to ignore. They have inserted themselves into my story, whether I like it or not. Both of them have perpetuated and publicized numerous conspiracy theories about myself and my family online, and this has led to irreparable harm to not just myself, but everyone associated with my family, including personal information being leaked, stalking, public harassment, and so much more. It doesn't matter that these guys never explicitly said they believe some of this stuff, nor do they verbally condone bad faith attacks. They discussed and entertained several conspiracies that directly hurt people who had nothing to do with any of this at all. One of the conspiracy claims was that my family donated personal funds to cover up the fact that we secretly stole all of the donor money. Both Mudahar and Carl discussed this as not only a legitimate possibility, but as a likely reality, despite the fact that no hard evidence of embezzlement has ever existed.
Pretty important part there. He has just framed that as they think Mudahar and Carl Jobst, or they've shown that it's a realistic possibility, these conspiracy theories that Gerard has just outlined. Let's see the clips that he shows following that claim.
One of the actual conspiracies for this is, one user writes, they just needed a few weeks to secure a loan or liquidate assets to come up with the money to do this. If this conspiracy theory is true and the California DOJ or the IRS are investigating, that's going to draw some serious eyeballs over to them. So if that money is there, just prove it exists. I get it. You're behind lawyers and PR agencies.
Did that sound like Mudahar was saying that that is true? Because from what I just heard, Mudahar said if it were to be true, the Department of Justice is going to take a look at it. Okay, that's the equivalent to me live streaming and somebody saying, yo, Mr. Beast just went out and like kicked a dog in the middle of the street. And me going, well, if he did that, the authorities would be contacted. He'd probably get arrested for animal abuse. Is that me somehow legitimizing the claim by saying, well, if it did happen, the authorities would investigate it? No. Talking about what the consequences of something that may happen doesn't legitimize the thing. It's just, well, if that is true, then the authorities will take care of it. Okay, that's it. It's a strange, again, it's just, that doesn't feel like a fair framing of what he's talking about here, of what Mudahar is saying.
An even more outrageous conspiracy tries to allege that my dad poisoned my mom in order to not just worsen her condition, but maybe even caused her diagnosis in the first place.
This conspiracy that he is bringing up right now, following up after talking about how Mutahar and Carl have platformed and tried to legitimize some of these theories about him, he brings up a conspiracy, like that he just said that his father was poisoning his mom, and it has 11 upvotes. I have comments on some of my videos saying that I'm the Antichrist, and they have 4 likes. Why would I ever believe, or believe strongly enough that I even comment about it, that those are ridiculous claims, and I can't believe that some people think I'm the Antichrist. This is a nothing burger, and especially someone like the Completionist with over 1 million subs who's been doing YouTube should recognize that there is going to be trash that gets thrown at you, that there are going to be crazy people that say crazy shit about your life and your personal situations if they end up being privy to it in some way. This is stuff that's bound to happen, and it just feels really weird and really suspicious that he brings this up, which to my knowledge, especially in his video, he doesn't show Mutahar talking about this, he doesn't show Carl talking about this, he's just pulling it up. And I for the life of me, can't understand why he felt the need to address this specific insane conspiracy theory. Matter of fact, he brings into literally the next frame of the video here, Carl Jobst then came back and wanted a divorce, and his dad said, no, I won't let you unless you see a doctor, because the only reason you'd want a divorce is if you've got a medical problem. Made her do tests for years until they diagnosed her with dementia. Let's just see what he's saying here to connect these two things.
These were particularly nasty conspiracies that I wanted to address in my initial response video from December of 2023, where I shared my mom's autopsy report to prove that yes, she did live and die with frontotemporal dementia. Some people were a little confused about this and were extremely upset that I used my mom's death certificate in that way that I did. But seeing all these accusations that were swirling around me, even the truth of my mom's disorder was now officially being questioned.
Now, maybe I am giving Gerard too much credit, that maybe he would be better apt at handling negative comments or crazy people that are interacting with him or talking about him on the internet. Because clearly this stuff gets to him. Again, he includes another Reddit post, and he talks about the fact that he had shown his mother's death certificate, about how they had used her brain and spine, and that came from a time where nobody was really asking for that info, and that's why people were so weirded out by it. It's like, why are you bringing this info up? That's not what we're concerned about. It was like bringing up everything except what people wanted to see, like the receipts from the foundation. And he's about to lead into this conversation that Carl Jobst has also taken a part of, where even Carl is saying that his father had a mistress in his mom's kind of final years, and he would end up seeing this woman and, be this mistress, which by definition is a woman that you're seeing while you're married, which at that point he still was married to Gerard's mom.
Just a couple years before my mom passed away, my dad started dating his now current wife while still being married to my mom. When you're committed to caring for someone with dementia for over a decade, life gets extremely complicated. My mom was at least 10 years into getting sick, and she was barely communicative at this point. My dad somehow found love at his senior age with an amazing woman who would go on to help our family take care of my mom well into her final days. I should not have to explain what I feel is no one's business but my family's. Unfortunately, there's Discord receipts of Carl stating that this was the last bit of family stuff that he was holding back, presumably until I decided to respond again, repeatedly referring to my stepmom as a mistress in my dad's supposed affair. It doesn't matter how much Carl tries to twist the truth here. There is no grand conspiracy here.
Now, my issue with this is it doesn't seem like Carl is wrong or being conspiratorial. If anything, Gerard here has just legitimized the claims that Carl was making, which is that Gerard's dad was seeing another woman before his mom had passed away. Now, to get into the nitty-gritty of that, to have your wife suffering from dementia to a point where she doesn't recognize you in the last couple years of their life, both of my grandfathers ended up having Alzheimer's or dementia in their later years. And admittedly, this is anecdotal, so take it for what it is, but you really do end up saying goodbye twice. You end up having that goodbye and that first experience of closure, I guess, when you realize that they're not going to remember you anymore. I saw how my parents had to deal with that. I, had to work through that along with my brothers when it happened individually for both of my grandpas. And then you do your second goodbye when they do finally pass away. And I think maybe specifically because I can understand that kind of point of no return, because I've had to go through it twice in my life, that I understand it. I can't imagine imagine that I would have a good grasp of what's going on behind closed doors for a family in this situation specifically. This wasn't my mom or dad. This was somebody who was already at like a nursing home, essentially. So I didn't have to see them on the daily. I didn't know what that experience was like. And especially with their specific instance of dementia, I don't know what that looks like. So I'm not really in the interest of making a judgment call about Gerard's dad and how he handled watching his wife completely lose herself to this disease and then partner up with somebody who is his now stepmom. I don't think that that's relevant to any of this. Carl has an interest in talking about these things in his Discord, etc. And I just personally don't see how that is applicable to understanding the truth of or understanding the context of this response given the charity fraud. It's not like the stepmom was stealing money or the father. Those have never been a part of the accusations or claims made against the completionist.
Despite what they claim, Mudahar and Carl are not journalists, accountants, lawyers, or even engineers.
That was a good one. That was it. Despite my issues with this video, kind of based.
They're YouTubers, just like me. That's why they never issued any corrections to this story, despite numerous allegations being thoroughly disproven even before my own response video came out. Corrections and questions are entertained as possible, but at no point did either of these two admit that they were wrong about anything they incorrectly cited. The 5% rule for charities to donate every single year, open hands filing status, expenses and contribution totals, or even my own words. These were all things that I tried to address in my response video, and others online had corrected them as well. There were a number of laws, requirements, and so much more that both Carl and Mudahar cited incorrectly, with no corrections to this very day. Let's take a step back real quick. Mudahar's first video released on November 13th. His next upload responding to online criticisms was on November 20th. His third video was on December the 2nd, and a fourth video was then released on December 7th, this time to talk about our donation to AFTD. Each and every video, Mudahar told his viewers that the open hand needed to be reported for an audit if you, the viewer, wanted anything to change.
Okay, so number one, addressing these changes, he brought up the small amount, how they can't just donate a small amount, like that was that huge text blurb that you saw. Again, there were ways to do it, as you just saw from the June the King video that I pointed out as well. So some of these things are still gray area. And like Gerard said himself, these people aren't lawyers. They're not 501c3 people. Why would they expect that people on the internet, just random passerbys, are going to have the correct corrections, if not just, trying to defend you? At the end of the day, if it's not newsworthy, they're going to just continue making their videos. It is kind of up to you at that point, not to say that that's right or wrong, but to kind of make that call. Your hands were tied because you were under investigation. That's not necessarily their fault. The burden of proof at that point was on you, and you would drop the ball already. I'm sure some of the corrections that they've probably recognized over the time that they were posting these videos could have been good to have a pinned comment thrown up, addressing some of those corrections, things like that. But to make an entire video, which, potentially would last maybe 5-10 minutes to make those small minor corrections to the story, it isn't done unless there's like a very good reason to, where they're like flagrantly wrong about the core parts of the issue, which doesn't seem to be the case. That may be a defensive thing coming from me, since I'm literally kind of in the same category. I do drama coverage, so this is kind of the same boat, and maybe I'm looking at it just from that perspective. So maybe you guys think differently about that. It seems to be asking for a lot that is not typically the standard, and on top of that, the issues that he's saying that they should have been making corrections on were just other people online coming in and giving them the corrections. How would they know the validity of those points being made? Now, the last thing that I want to cover towards the end of this has to do with his point that he starts to set up, where he's showing where specifically Mudahar is telling people, hey, report this to the Department of Justice so that there can be an investigation, going over and over and over. And then Gerard ends up pointing out, well, he says that that's super important, but he says that even if they end up finding no wrongdoing, that doesn't even matter. And he shows this clip.
If you have the money, I don't think it's illogical to show that you have the money and you are willing to donate it. Unless, of course, even if possessing the money after all of this, there are still some serious legal repercussions.
Instead of admitting that, hey, maybe he might have gone too far, Mudahar doubled down, saying that a criminal investigation by the government suddenly doesn't disprove his accusations that we broke the law.
Now, the audit was never the smoking gun during this video, and you might be like, whoa, what are you talking about, Muda?
This is the exact investigation that Mudahar instructed his viewers would deliver justice if they followed his instructions.
Do you want justice to be delivered? So I'm going to teach you guys how to report this properly. Now, obviously, if you want any agency to look into this, check the state of California.
So I don't quite understand what he's referencing with this smoking gun thing, because he doesn't end up following forward with more of the clip of what Mudahar here is talking about, which is strange. If it was really proving his point, I figured he'd just include the entire segment there. Additionally, he's trying to make it seem that Mudahar telling people to report this to the Department of Justice is somehow a bad thing if they believe wrongdoing has occurred. If you suspect a crime has been committed, like what people thought had happened, you're supposed to report it. And Mudahar had a video and made the claim multiple times, but also had a video showing people how to properly report the foundation to the Department of Justice. That is not the wrong thing to do if you suspect that a crime has occurred. It's what you're supposed to do. But then he follows it up with this clip from Carl trying to further prove his point.
I couldn't give two shits if any of that is illegal or illegal. It would not affect my own moral judgments because I don't base my morals on whether or not a court convicts someone of a crime.
However, instead of admitting that he got anything wrong in his videos, Carl conveniently says that he is not a journalist, he's just making entertainment.
The purpose of a YouTube video is first and foremost to entertain, because if a video isn't easy to understand or entertaining, people won't watch it and I will get less money.
Accusations of criminal wrongdoing and inexcusable moral character are now a form of entertainment and should not be taken as fact, despite the fact that Carl cites himself constantly as an investigative journalist, both in his GoFundMe campaigns, on the record in the courtroom in several different cases, and even in one of his most recent videos.
My channel and my investigative work improved dramatically after I got sued.
Now, I do think he has a fair point about Carl going back and forth about calling himself an investigative journalist and kind of disregarding and saying, well, none of this matters. It's just for entertainment. You shouldn't be taking everything that I'm saying like directly at my word. But additionally, Carl's saying that he's like, doesn't matter. He doesn't give two shits of if it's legal or illegal. Well, maybe some people do care, so that's why he's sharing. But he talks about it's not about that because he doesn't set his morals on the laws, which I don't think Gerard would disagree with, because at the very beginning of this video, of his new response, he says this.
However, even if we never broke the law, serious moral mistakes were still made by myself and the foundation.
You guys are on the same page. You just made the same point that you're now like giving him shit for towards the end. Serious moral mistakes, moral things, not about the legality of it, which you are separating yourself. Carl is doing the exact same thing here.
Despite the best efforts that I put in my initial response video, I was never going to win no matter what I said. The money got donated, but that was never the true goal. For Carl and Mudahar to succeed, I had to be irredeemable, and nothing I could have legally provided at the time would have been enough.
Which I will once again prove in this video that you cannot take Gerard at his word. He is proven to be somebody that is deceptive.
It was my 16-minute video under the scrutiny of countless legal professionals versus their 8+ hours of sponsored conspiracy-based attacks. So, as a recap, yes, I did lie about where the donations were going. Knowingly so after Indieland 2022. I try to take responsibility privately by making sure that the money got donated appropriately, hoping that I could minimize the damage this might do to everyone in my life, keeping this a secret to prevent anyone else from being complicit. In reality, continuing to hide this throughout 2023 only made everything worse, because now I was still directly complicit. There was always going to be hell to pay, and I was just being stupid about all of this. I should have just partnered with the organization directly, made things right from the beginning, and not cared about restricted donations or where the money was going.
So in tandem with, I would say, implying the claim that because they are sponsored videos, they have an ulterior motive to absolutely destroy this man's career and livelihood, whether that's true or not, I feel like that's the implication that he's making. He also includes that clip from Mudahar saying, at the end of the day, Gerard is being deceptive, and you can't take him at his word. He sets us up to be the victim here, that there was nothing that he could do. He was legally held back from being able to provide the receipts that he would have needed to show us his innocence. And then he follows up with saying, I did it. You know, I lied about where the funds were going knowingly for over a year and the years leading before that. I don't know how to tell you this. Whether he thinks it's fair or not, he proved himself to be deceptive, that you can't trust him, especially in a situation this critical, when there are so many eyes on you, you can't really take that back at that point. The time to figure that out and resolve it and deal with the small blowback you would have is when you first found out. It's when you were negligent and ignorant to what was going on at the charity that you were telling everyone to go donate to, that you yourself were a part of, that you were on the board for. It is not their faults for them to come to the assertions that they did, to the beliefs that they did after having their phone call with you, after going through the information that they had to make the assertions that they did. And the fact that you got investigated, it was a culmination of the mistakes that you had made. Whether they were intentional, malicious, or just out of complete naivety and just obliviousness to what was going on, they are the results of your own actions or inaction. To try to make it seem like they did this intentionally made you an irredeemable villain to get a few more clicks for their sponsored, War Thunder advertisements, seems like it's just trying to discredit them rather than prove yourself truthful. As a matter of fact, this entire video, almost every step of the way, all this video is doing is attempting to discredit Carl and Mudahar. It's not showing more proof of his side outside of a few Excel spreadsheets that they put together. He's not showing proof. He's just trying to make it seem like they're doing these things or that they did what they did to him for an ulterior motive, for money. They did it for fame, for clout, as opposed to exposing what was going on and the fact that it looked like charity fraud to them. I think that's what irks me the most. When it's repeated over the course of this 45-minute video, it just starts to grate on me. I'm very interested to see, as Carl Jobst has made a point, he posted on Twitter that he will be making a video or kind of responding to things that he said were just completely wrong about some of the points made in this response by Gerard. If in the comments I read through some of the points that you guys are making, or my understanding of what he's trying to do here or what it feels like, if I see any of that that ends up making a bit more sense to me, I will be sure to correct, my arguments here or go over them in this next update video, because I am very curious. I am going to keep up on the coverage of this story. So again, turn that bell on if you're subbed, whatnot. Hope you enjoy whatever follow-up coverage there is, but that does wrap up the video. He goes into some final accountability and then just says, hey, I just want to make more videos. That is like truly the end of it. I'll leave a link down in the description to this video so you guys can watch it in your own time, make your own judgment calls. But that's it until we get an update from this. I'll see you guys later. Adios, peace, bye.